Hello, this is an ESL English practice video with Traveller's Guide. My name is Andrew and welcome along to the video. This video is designed to help you if you are learning English, whether it's for IELTS or TOEFL or any English proficiency test. Remember to press the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, share and switch on the subtitles to help you understand. In today's video, we're going to be looking at IELTS Writing Task 1. The IELTS Writing test consists of two tasks. For Task 1, you should write at least 150 words. You should spend about 20 minutes on that part, and it's worth 1/3 or 33% of your final mark. In Task 2, it's a bit longer. You should write at least 250 words and spend 40 minutes on that one, and it's worth 2/3 of your final score. Both of the tests are marked on the following 4 criteria: task response or task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, and grammatical range and accuracy. Task response in Task 1 basically means, did you answer the question? Did you summarize the information in the picture? Coherence and cohesion means, does it flow from one idea to the next? Are your ideas in a logical order? Lexical resource is another way of saying vocabulary, so you have to show that you can use a range of words. Synonyms are a good idea, and grammatical range and accuracy is about verb tenses, sentence structure, and general English grammar. Remember that spelling and handwriting are also important, as bad spelling can change the meaning of the word you're trying to say, and poor handwriting can make it difficult for the examiner to understand your meaning. Today we're going to look at an IELTS Academic Task 1 example. The Academic Task 1 involves you writing about a picture, which is often a graph. Graphs can also be called charts or grids, perhaps tables or diagrams, and the word graph can also be a verb. These graphs and charts display information. Useful synonyms for information include data, figures, details, statistics, evidence, features, specifics, or intelligence. And some of the graphs that you might be provided with include line graphs, bar charts, flowcharts or process diagrams, tables, maybe a Venn diagram, pie charts, and maps. You should spend about 20 minutes on Task 1, but do not start writing straight away. I strongly recommend that you spend 5 minutes planning your writing. You should then spend around 10 minutes actually writing, and the final 5 minutes editing your work, correcting it and improving it. So when I say spend the first 5 minutes preparing, what do I mean? Well, read the question carefully. Try to understand as much of the question as you can. Also spend some time looking carefully at the diagram and make sure you understand what it is trying to tell you. Then think about what you'll write, maybe make some quick notes, and plan your structure. The structure of a Task 1 writing must include an introduction. This will tell the reader what you're going to talk about and introduce the topic. You should then have a body paragraph describing what you can see in the diagram, followed by a body paragraph making comparisons where appropriate. You may have more than 2 body paragraphs, depending on how much you want to write. And finally, you can finish your writing with a conclusion, although in Task 1, this is optional, and sometimes the writing really doesn't need one. Let's look at our IELTS Academic Task 1 question. Here it is. So this is an IELTS Writing Task 1, and you should spend about 20 minutes on this task. The graph below shows the height of 3 brothers, Sam, Tony, and Barry, over a 10-year period. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Write at least 150 words. And below we can see a graph with 3 different coloured lines, and the title is height, brackets centimetres. So as we discussed before, you should spend about 20 minutes on this task. This is always the same for task 1. Then this line about summarising the information, this sentence or a variation of this sentence is always found in task 1 as well. And finally we have the phrase write at least 150 words. Notice the phrase at least, which means you can write as many words as you want as long as it is not less than 150 words. If you write less than 150 words, your score will be penalised. So I'm going to remove some of this writing so we can see the graph more easily. Now we're just left with the introductory sentence. So let's take some time to look at this graph. Here on the y-axis we have numbers starting at 120 going up in tens to a maximum of 190, and we know that this is the height in centimetres. Along the y-axis, along the bottom, we have dates. Each one is the 1st of January, and they're in consecutive years, 2001 all the way through to 2010. And at the bottom it tells us the key. So the blue line relates to Sam, the orange line is Tony, and the green line is Barry. Then in the middle of the graph we can see 3 lines, the blue line, the orange line, and the green line. So this represents the height of each boy over time, starting in 2001 up until 2010. As you might expect, each of them gets a bit taller in that time frame, so they must be starting out quite young, they're not fully grown, and by the end of the graph they have stopped growing and they've reached their final heights. So the graph is telling us how their height has changed as time goes on. So now we've spent some time understanding the question, it's time to begin writing. And we will start with our introduction. When writing introductions, I like to use this 3-step rule. Replace the vocabulary using synonyms. We're going to use the introductory sentence in the question for our introduction. But first, we need to replace the vocabulary using synonyms. Then rearrange the sentence so the words are in a different order. And finally, add extra information. This will make our introduction unique, different from the question, and show our ability straight away. Here's my introduction. The heights of 3 male siblings have been charted in the line graph provided, showing how they changed over time from January 2001 until January 2010. So you can see I'm using a lot of information from the question, but I have changed some of the vocabulary, rearranged the sentence, and added some extra information. For example, I've taken the word brothers and exchanged it for the phrase male siblings. In the question it said graph, but I've been more specific and written line graph. And here in the question we have the phrase 10-year period. I've expanded that out to say from January 2001 until January 2010. I don't want to be listing all of the years here, but naming the first one and the last one is a good option. Now we're going to move on to our body paragraphs, describing the diagrams and making comparisons. For this writing, I'm not going to include a conclusion. Let's have a look at my full answer now. The heights of 3 male siblings have been charted in the line graph provided, showing how they changed over time from January 2001 until January 2010. In 2001, when the study began, the tallest of the 3 boys was Sam, at around 160 centimetres. Tony was the second tallest, measuring just under 150 centimetres, while Barry, who was probably the youngest brother, stood at around 122 centimetres tall. By 2004, Sam was fully grown, having reached his final height of approximately 176 centimetres. He was still the tallest brother, but Tony was catching up, and by 2005 he had overtaken Sam as the tallest. Tony continued to grow for about 2 more years, finally stopping at about 184 centimetres. Meanwhile, Barry proceeded to get taller at a constant rate, and at some point in 2007 he grew level with Sam. Barry did not stop growing though until 2009, when his height became the same as his brother Tony's. Tony and Barry shared the accolade of tallest brother in 2010, which is in stark contrast to how the situation was in 2001. Sam, who had started the decade as the tallest, had been caught and surpassed by both of his brothers and was now the shortest of the three. Now, for the last 5 minutes, you should edit your work. So read your own work carefully. Look for any spelling, punctuation, or grammar mistakes and correct them. Replace any weak or repeated vocabulary. So don't use the same word too many times. And if you are writing your test by hand, make sure your handwriting is clear. So how does my essay match up with the marking criteria? First of all, task response. Did you answer the question? Well, we are asked to summarise the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So in my answer, I have done that. I have summarised the information and I've made comparisons. I've used specific data from the graph, such as the numbers, and make sure if you use numbers you always use the units. I'm also writing the full word centimetres, not just cm. And the highlighted blue words show comparisons: tallest, contrast, shortest. This shows that I am summarising the data and making comparisons. Next, coherence and cohesion. Does my essay flow in a logical order? Well, I've started with an introduction. I've then gone on to talk about how the situation was at the beginning of the charted period, followed by a description of what happens as the chart progresses. And I've ended by talking about the situation at the end of the study. So I'd say that is a logical order for the essay to be in, and the structure is what you would expect for a Task 1 writing. Next, lexical resource or vocabulary. How is my vocabulary? I've highlighted in blue some high-level vocabulary words: siblings, measuring, approximately, overtaken, proceeded, accolade, decade, and surpassed. Not only are these high-level words, but they are used in the correct way, which would give me a good score for vocabulary. Here we can see some phrases that I've used, which will help my vocabulary score. Second tallest, just under, stood at, fully grown, catching up, and stark contrast. And here I've highlighted the vocabulary used to describe how the data behaves in the graph. Charted, changed over time, reached, continued, constant rate, grew level, the same as, and in contrast. Please just notice the phrase the same as. It's not as same as, or the same with, or the same like. It's the same as. This is a fairly simple phrase, but I hear a lot of people make mistakes with it. And finally, grammatical range and accuracy. So my verb tenses, my sentence structure, word order, articles, that kind of thing. I'm mostly using the past tense. The timeline of the graph is between 2001 and 2010, so it's in the past. I've used a mixture of complex and simple sentences. The yellow one here is a complex sentence, while the green one is much simpler. Your writing shouldn't all be very complex sentences. A mixture of simple sentences and complex sentences is much better, much easier to read, and much more natural. And my spelling is all okay, and handwriting doesn't apply in this situation. For Academic Task 1, you do not need to give your opinions, use examples from your own life, give reasons for the data, or agree or disagree with anything. These things are only for Academic Task 2. Remember that the marking of the writing is subjective. There is no right or wrong answer, and the examiner will use their judgment to give your essay a score. It is possible for different examiners to have slightly different opinions and give slightly different scores, but generally scores should not vary much from one examiner to the next. However, there is an appeals process if you feel like your essay has been given too low a grade. And that concludes my video for IELTS Writing Task 1. Please feel free to check out my other videos. Remember to press the thumbs up and subscribe. I'll be back again with another video later, but in the meantime, keep going with your English learning. Good luck and goodbye for now.